Okay, so the future has arrived. You know, to be honest, when I saw this, I sort of actually didn't really agree. So I spent the last weekend watching sci-fi movies to try to convince myself, and not being a particular sci-fi fan, I actually prefer 18th century bonnet dramas. But I had to step in somewhere. So I know that James Bond isn't sci-fi, but here we go. So I was looking for technology, and I wanted to sort of validate the assumption, or the hypothesis that, the future has arrived. So in Goldfinger, 1967, James Bond has a little device that he puts into his shoe that allows Q to track him around Fort Knox and foil Goldfinger's plan. And they called it a Homer, and we call it your phone, which, you know, is driven by GPS satellite, city Wi-Fi. So yes, it has in this cat. The second movie that I saw, Sleeper, this one's a little bit obscure. So Miles, played by Woody Allen, goes in for routine peptic ulcer surgery, dies. His family cryogenically freezes him, and he wakes up 200 years later in an oppressive regime. So cryogenics doesn't really exist yet, but it's not stopping people from freezing themselves in a shivering anticipation. This is really good, Gattaca. So Gattaca is all about genetic modification. And in this case, you have two types of humans: valids, who have great career prospects and health and love and life expectancy, and invalids who don't. Genetic modification, well, according to MIT Tech Review, the first known US example of us editing genes happened in July. So we were only allowed to, we only kept them for 3 days, but the fact is that we've done it, and now we have to figure out the ethics of what do we, you know, we can do it, but what does that mean? And the last one, scientists create sentient being that turns bad, murders, and demands a mate. So sentient beings, I guess, does that exist? It depends on your definition. We, beat the Turing test in 2014, which is the ability for a person to determine who they're speaking on the other end of a chat is human or machine. But it's not just chat. A couple of months ago in South Korea, Google's DeepMind AlphaGo beat a professional Go player. And the interesting thing about that is that it was really unnerving, not because the computer beat the human, but because it seemed to kind of display this elegance and creativity and grace in its strategy. And that really upset a lot of people. So this is how people in the past imagined the future. And some got it right and some got it wrong. And I think the question for me is, how do we prepare ourselves for that so that we don't build things that are obsolete, like the car phone or the mini disc? Or even worse, how do we avoid from tragically changing things that are already good about the world? One of the examples at the moment is artificial intelligence. That's got a few people very, very concerned, and smart people too, like Stephen Hawking. So whenever I have a big question, I go back to the 60s, and Howard had Sigmund as his crazy, strange man, and I've got this guy, Cedric Price. He was a controversial and influential architect, and he's known for unexpected designs. My personal favourite is this one. This is a portable airport. Yeah. He's also known for some stellar quotes. This is probably the most overused quote in our industry, but I'm going to use it anyway. And I think what it reminds me of is that, Cedric basically dealt with uncertainty in the future by dwelling on the question. And here's an example of a question that he articulated. So how to invite people in to ask questions while enabling those who actually know to expand and exchange information in a pleasurable and identifiable surroundings. I think that, especially after hearing Howard talk earlier, is a problem we have today. If you take climate change, we've definitely got the first part right. We've definitely invited discussion, but we haven't got the second part right. We're not allowing those who know to actually exchange information, and that's really, really difficult. So come back to the present. What does this all mean, and how do you, practically change the way that you're working? So where I work, we have a few ways of doing this. One is that we try to encourage this culture of questioning the brief, meaning if someone comes to you to design a bridge, you ask them why they want the bridge in the first place. That's pretty simple, but practically it doesn't always work. And so for more complicated situations, we have this foresight, research and innovation team. So our foresight team's job is to keep an eye on the future questions we think we're going to encounter. And the research team is meant to help our people set up collaborative research, most importantly with people outside Arup, so our clients, our collaborators, universities, community, to try to test some of the solutions that we think we can come up with to solve these problems of the future. And this is, I think, so critical when you're wanting to implement solutions on projects. You really have to test them first. And we do try to focus on the built environment, but everything is a system and it's only becoming more so. So we tend to actually focus on each of these areas, elements, as what we call drivers of change. So what's on our mind at the moment? Now we're talking about the immediate future. So I'm just going to run through, one or two observations. Maybe we're thinking about the next 0 to 3 years. So socially, big trend that we're seeing now, generational change. You've got baby boomers on one side, millennials on the other, and each has a completely different way and completely different expectations of work, of design, of service, what's good service, what's bad, of social norms. And there's big wealth discrepancy as well. In terms of technology, I mean, we're in the age of augmentation. Damn well, that was incredible. And it's not just robotics that's augmented. We've got augmented reality, we've got artificial intelligence, we've got machine learning. And I think there's a lot of people talking about this later today, so I'm not going to go into it. Environmental, climate change. I think, again, we've got lots of experts in the room that we can talk about that too. Economic. Feels like we're on the verge of a downturn, but we're also on the verge of being able to take opportunities of new business models, new opportunities for value exchange. And political, that's probably the most disturbing one of all at the moment. We have political uncertainty everywhere and voicing of extremes everywhere as well, the UK, US, North Korea, even here. We also have a shift in global power shifting back east. So I guess I haven't really painted an optimistic next 0 to 3 years, but I actually am quite optimistic about it. I think we have more technological capability than ever before, and the most sort of heartwarming thing is that we're getting much better at working together across disciplines, but also across sectors and governments. So I think I'm actually quite confident that our technology and solutions will catch up. I think the problem is, well, as long as we set them to the right problem. So to the immediate future, I'm just going to share with you 3 problems that we have set ourselves in the last year or so to try to solve. But while I do that, rather than have you zone out, I would like to just prompt you to think about the problems that you think you're going to see in the next 1 to 5 years. And this might be a good way to prep for your competition at the end of the day. So this is, I'm going to stand over here because I feel like I've been... okay, so this is what I see as problem number 1. So problem number 1 is that we're more digitally connected, but less genuinely connected. Yeah. So, anecdotally, there's more anxiety. There's less attention span. We're not giving ourselves time to think. I think Heiko put it really well a couple of months ago that he didn't think that we were staring out the window of the train enough and giving ourselves time for deep thought and creativity. And so, this is a big problem to solve, but we break it up into chunks, and this is the project we set ourselves. We wanted to try to figure out how we might use or embed technology into a building so that we can get people out of their smartphone and engaged in their environment. So this is Collingwood Arts Precinct. I have to admit, I'm from Melbourne, and I didn't think that laneway was particularly messy that you showed before, but hey. So this is Collingwood Arts Precinct. It's meant to be a residence for artists, but also a place where the community can come in and engage with them. The problem is that artists want to work. They only want to engage every now and again. And so we were playing with all sorts of different ideas. And you can see in here we've got some e-ink displays, which are kind of like big Kindles. So they just are black and white, and they're really kind of calm, and they're not aggressive. They're not like LEDs that are in your face. And so we wanted to see what would happen if we could get people to kind of talk to the building and to each other, and allow for a little bit of collaboration between these two groups without it being sort of always through notifications. And so that's what this project is here. I think the pregnant lady gets handed a beer at the end, which I got in a lot of trouble for that one. But so problem number 2, I mentioned this one before about generational change. If you couple that trend with more and more people moving to our cities, I think we're starting to see an expectation of the citizens that they might be able to inform their own city. And so for this project, we latched onto augmented reality, and we put a building inside a little phone, and then we took it to the street and showed the building in situ. And we forced ourselves as introverted engineers to test with citizens on the street, show it to the city, show developers, show a sort of vigilante design group from North Melbourne who were sort of anti-crap design, basically. They were quite interested. So we thought that we thought that people wouldn't really like this. The point was that we wanted to see if there was a better way to communicate the future buildings in the streets from current planning notices, which are often hidden and sometimes intentionally so. And we were quite pleased with ourselves. We thought developers would hate it, but it turned out they loved being able to show the details of a design because they might be able to find elements of the building, like a colour or a shape that people hated, which they could change and then open up their market. And the city liked it because they could genuinely interact with people and show them what was happening in their streets in a way that was intuitive to people who don't normally read plans. So we were pretty pleased with ourselves. Actually, I got sort of all puffed up. And then I saw this, which is in Europe, where they have for many years been just erecting simple timber structures the height of the building, which I think actually this is an arts project, but it just as effectively shows the future building in the street, probably cheaper, probably better. So I guess technology is not always the answer, but it was fun trying. And this is the last one. So this problem is an interesting one. With this trend towards personalisation, we're finding a lot of our clients really want to know not just how we're going to design this office building, but what's the journey that the person went on to get from home to work, how did they get into the building, what were their pain points, what delighted them, etc., etc. And this is sort of helped by, we've kind of created this problem ourselves with, in the age of big data analytics, quantification, etc. But I think the problem is that we're finding that, yes, data is great, but quantitative data alone doesn't give you real insight. What we're finding is that you want the quantitative data to make an observation, but then you want to couple it with deep qualitative interviews to understand what's really happening. We joke that this doesn't actually tell us anything new, but it really mesmerises people when they watch it, so it's like a pacifier. We're not even solving a problem with this. I mean, we ultimately want to figure out how to provide good service. This is actually transport routes for a number of students in Sydney a couple of weeks ago. So we do have a problem that we want to solve, but we're really just spending the time trying to understand the problem, and that to us is worth it. So what's the point for this whole presentation? We've looked at the past and the present, and this is the immediate future. And if you look at current science fiction trends, you'd be forgiven for thinking that we've got this in our future. I was told people would get a Game of Thrones reference, but I've never seen it. So it's there. I have seen this one. Well, apparently there's a dragon that melts it, and that's all I got. So anyway, I did see this one, which is 2 people wake up on a spaceship to the new planet 80 years too early. So you would be forgiven for thinking that this might be in our future, but I just think you should ignore it all. I mean, it's fun, but ignore it. This is the food for thought that I'd like to get everybody thinking about, especially for this afternoon. So everything that is inconvenient now will be automated and removed. So sometimes, people worry about their own jobs with this one. I don't think we need to at all. And if you think about people that that might be living in new buildings or working in new offices, the things that are inconvenient to them will be automated and removed. So instead of focusing on the tech that will do this, I think we need to let our experts do that. And I mean, there's so many of them and they're amazing, they're all working together. I think as industry, we need to think about 3 things. So the first is, what were the problems that you were solving at the start of your careers? The second is, how have they evolved into the problems that you're solving now and in the immediate future? And the third thing is, how are they going to evolve in the problems, into the problems that you're going to need to be solving in the next 10 years? And my contention is that if we get that problem definition right, the technology and the science will catch up, just like it did with this guy.